All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. It's me, Addy, again, and I hope you guys have got your Plagas murdering jackets on because it's time to review Resident Evil 4 Remake. So hot on the heels of playing through the original Resident Evil 4 and reviewing that one for you guys the other day, the passage of time finally brought us to the midnight hour of March the 24th, 2023, when the Plagas, or I of course mean the remake to Resident Evil 4, finally awakened. And I had the wonderful opportunity to sit down and stream through it all this weekend. And dude, what can I say? This is how you do a fucking remake. So this past month turned me into a huge fan of the original Resident Evil 4. I loved its story and its perfect blend of action-packed set pieces and survival horror characteristics, which in many ways put it ahead of its time. And you know what? Despite its shortcomings that mainly had to do with the character writing and quality of life features that hadn't been treated well by time, I still walked away from this experience with a burning question, which was, does this game really need a remake? And boy oh boy, after my 22-hour playthrough of Resident Evil 4 Remake, I can confidently answer that question with a resounding yes. Resident Evil 4 Remake takes absolutely everything about the original experience, even the things that you didn't realize were issues with it in the first place, and somehow manages to elevate each and every one of these facets of the game without ever missing a beat. And in today's review, I'm going to go over all of these things, ranging from the aspects of the original Resident Evil 4 that made it a classic beloved horror title, to the more unfavorable ones that did not age well in my opinion. So why don't we begin with the latter, since I feel personally that a remake's duty first and foremost should be to fix the issues of its original material so that its fans can experience it in a definitive way. And let me tell you, Resident Evil 4 Remake does this beautifully. It starts by adding in tiny gameplay modernizations that drastically improve the QOL of the original game, such as the ability to move around while aiming, letting you auto-optimize your inventory, allowing you to hotkey weapons, giving you a storage for all those weapons, and so much more. And then it moves on to much bigger things, chief of which is the character writing and storytelling. While Leon S. Kennedy was a really fun character to play as and follow in the original Resident Evil 4, I couldn't really give much praise to a majority of the game's other characters, who largely came across as two-dimensional, tropey, and in some cases extremely annoying and unlikable. Ashley. And I understand that a good portion of this was a byproduct of the game's overall campy tone, but playing through the remake made me realize in hindsight just how bland so many of the original game's characters are, not just Ashley. And that's because the remake does the unthinkable here. And that's the fact that it improves upon every single character presented in the game by thoroughly fleshing them out and treating them seriously. Through having a more serious tone throughout and incorporating so many meaningful cutscenes and character interactions full of excellent writing, voice acting, and visuals. Oh my god, the visuals. I mean, the character models, and specifically their eyes in the RE engine here, are so evocative. The game beckons so many emotional responses out of you, specifically empathy for its protagonists. Leon's jaded and cocky yet noble persona from the original has been expanded upon so brilliantly here. And Ashley, the character who quite possibly took this game from being amazing to a masterpiece for me, changed my perspective towards her entirely. Now, as a quick recap, like I said in my review of the original, in that game, she was nothing more than this self-centered screaming machine. I'm sorry, that's the best way I can think to describe her, who I despised. But in the remake, she's been beautifully redeemed into this lovely, endearing character with so much depth, who I actually wanted to protect at all costs. And this is a feeling that the original should have gotten across, considering that it really wants you to care for her as she's your traveling companion who you need to constantly save and protect, but never did, since she came off as nothing more than a plot device and this rude damsel in distress. In this game though, she's so much more fleshed out. Her complex mixture of trauma, soft-heartedness, and eventual bravery and confidence in the midst of the horrible events she has to endure truly made me care for her and see her as a friend worth fighting for, as opposed to a burden. And then the way her dynamic with Leon evolves throughout the game was such a joy to witness and was executed wonderfully. And I'll be honest here, I went from hating her and considering her the weakest part of the original to straight up having the biggest crush on her in this remake, I'll admit. That is just how brilliantly this game handles its characters. And her incredible impact in the game doesn't just end in the context of the narrative. where she adds so much to the gameplay as well. Now, as I said earlier, the remake takes great strides to polish up all the quality of life issues that the original had, mainly through adding very welcome modernizations to its gameplay. And one of those areas has to do with the companion mechanics while traveling with Ashley and protecting her. She can't get down. Oh my gosh, is she actually gonna come through the house? Imagine. Holy crap, she does. That is some incredible AI. Holy fuck. Now, as opposed to being someone with a health bar who can be outright killed, Ashley in the remake is merely downed by enemies, and all you need to do is go revive her before she's hit again and killed. And instead of the commands you give her being cut and dried, wait and follow ones like in the original, they're a little more complex and have her either following you closely or staying far back and out of sight while you take care of enemies. There are even fun ways to interact with the environment and access certain areas while working together with her. And lastly, when she does inevitably get kidnapped by enemies during combat like in the original, there is so much more weight behind it and you feel so much urgency to rescue her immediately, all due to how wonderfully her character has been brought to life in the remake. And then you have all these tiny embellishments, right? All the tiny embellishments in the form of Leon and Ashley's voice lines, and the quality of the voice work itself during these encounters make everything so much more immersive. Ashley's screams are harrowing as opposed to annoying. She even exclaims now when Leon's attacked by an enemy, showing that she's concerned for his safety as much as that of hers. I just love that about her character. She's so caring in this game. Holy. Dude, and her, like, the voice acting for it, that was another big thing about the OG. It wasn't great, but here it is incredible. Like, you actually, it's so harrowing, right? And she doesn't just scream out when she's being captured, but also when we're being attacked. Like, she doesn't want Leon to die, obviously, because that's her only ticket out of here. God damn. And that's unlike in the original where we don't get that impression at all. And on top of all this, you guys, Leon just sounds like a badass here when he's shooting at all the fiends trying to take her away.
Drop the girl.
Just all the new voice lines here are so good, and combined with how well the characters have been written here and how that extends to the gameplay, the experience of playing through the game is a blast, and I was so happy about that. And it's crazy how when it came to the characters that weren't even really that problematic in the original game, the remake still somehow found a way to improve upon them. The greatest example of that is of course Leon, but before I talk about him, I also want to take a little second to mention my favorite example who was also conducive to some of my favorite moments in this remake, and that's Luis. Now listen, I didn't really mind this charismatic ladies man in the original game, but again, playing this remake made me realize in hindsight just how many gaps there were in his character in the original that had the potential to be fleshed out. The remake finds every single one of those gaps with Luis and fleshes them out superbly, to the point where he went from being this goofy-ass side character, an interesting little bit of comic relief, to one of the most layered characters and one of my favorites in the entire game. And it was a combination of making him so much more involved in the game's story and even its gameplay, which that was so amazing, and don't worry, I won't go into spoilers on, but absolutely blew me away. And again, treating him a lot more seriously and giving him more human qualities that, just like with Ashley, made us care about him significantly more than in the original. This game just doesn't even stop for a second when it comes to finding each and every character, both hero and villain, major and minor, and making them as compelling and indelible as possible. It is astonishing. And perhaps my favorite aspect of all this is how the game manages to make these characters a lot more believable while still retaining their charm from the original game. And honestly, that point can pretty much be made about the game's tone as a whole. And Leon himself is the best example of what I'm talking about here. In 4 Remake, Leon no longer capoeiras through 1000-degree lasers or spiral jumps out of windows after which he asks his CEO out on a date. The brashness of his behavior has been drastically toned down in the remake in favor of this much more serious and dour tone that is more in line with the more recent entries in the Resident Evil series. Now, just like in the original, Leon's character traits influence the tone of the overarching story. And while there in the original he was significantly flashier, which gives the rest of that game's story a strong campy action movie tone, here in the remake he's a lot more sullen and subdued after the traumatic events of Resident Evil 2 Remake, which are realistic qualities that make the rest of the game a lot more sinister and moodier. But thing is, even though he's so much more grounded and believable as a result of that, the high-octane action and incredibly fun gameplay that is made possible through his swagger in the original is still present here in the remake. Leon can still pull off his extremely visceral and iconic roundhouse kicks, suplexes, and backflips against the terrifying biohazards that await him. And he still retains his cocky, shit-talking nature from the original that made him such a beloved character, where he'll spew forth these amazing and darkly humorous one-liners whilst taking down a multitude of abominable foes.
I am flattered. But I'm a one-lady type of guy.
Let's go, Leon. You tell him. And oh my god, instead of shying away from it, you guys, the remake goes ham on this. If you thought Leon had a lot of one-liners in the original, prepare to witness double that amount here. Because every enemy encounter, both big and small, has Leon quipping left and right with so many cheesy yet creative one-liners that make the fight so much more fun, offset the inherent horror of the game, and continue to solidify him as such a great character in this remake. I just couldn't help but grin stupidly every single time I fought an enemy, and Leon would say something goofy yet amazing like, "You need to chill out after showering an enemy in liquid nitrogen," or "Nighty-night nights" after wrecking up a bunch of zombies cosplaying as a Dark Souls character.
Give my regards to your god.
Sick. They go ham, man. They just go all out on Leon's one-liners. I loved all of it so much that I got to the point where I was pretty much trying to one-up Leon during my gameplay commentary when it came to the one-liners department. Sorry, man. I have no time to play. It was all so great. And the concept of straddling the line between giving the remake a much darker tone and retaining so much of its charm as a love letter to the original fans was executed flawlessly by Capcom. They succeeded with flying colors and modernizing yet preserving Resident Evil 4's identity as a survival horror game filled with over-the-top, fun, exuberant action. And they didn't just take the characters that were already pretty great in the original and improve upon them, but so many of its aspects that were damn near perfect as well and would be difficult to top. The action set pieces and boss fights in the original game were top tier. Even 18 years later, they hold up pretty well. But this game made almost every single one of them even more exciting, exhilarating, and memorable without losing momentum. And even the amazing AI that I lauded the original experience for as a first-time player 18 years after its release had been improved drastically. Not only do the enemies retain their intelligence from the original, but here they're even smarter, more reactive, more varied, and more cooperative with each other while trying to take Leon down, and just overall so much creepier. They truly blew me away, and I honestly felt like the enemy AI in this game is to 2023 what it was in the original to the year 2005, which is absolutely revolutionary for its time. The chainsaw demo that I played a couple weeks before this game's release left me with very high expectations for the full release when it came to not only the combat experience against these enemies, but how exciting each set piece, boss fight, and story beat was going to be presented and expanded upon down the line. And the full game absolutely crushed it and exceeded pretty much all of them. Fighting enemies with various weapons from the original and brand spanking new ones could not be more satisfying, especially with all the new layered mechanics, such as those that have to do with knifing. No longer is Leon's combat knife just a standard zombie cutter anymore, but it serves as an upgradable parrying tool and a means of pulling off some of the most satisfying defensive kills, stealth kills. That's right, that's another thing. This game has stealth now, which is incredible, and so much more. All of which consist of these beautiful animations, which is another can of worms entirely. Just like with the original RE4, every single subtle movement made by each character model here in the remake looked more realistic than freaking motions made by people in real life, further continuing to boast how incredible the RE engine is. Witnessing brand new enemy types was a blast as well. There was just so much enemy variety here, featuring pretty much every single foe from the original game, and even new ones on top of that that blew me away, not just because of the fact that they had brand new behaviors that made for some riveting and intense gameplay, but also because they were redesigned in what I think is the most accurate oxymoron to use here. Beautifully horrifying. Man, overall, I just couldn't put the controller down until my eyes were burning and I needed sleep. And then you've also got solid progression. Like, progression-wise, the way you work through this game in its wide linear nature, as it takes many familiar locations from the original and intertwines them with brand new ones that are so expansive, was also incredibly fun and addictive. And everything in these areas that were so great in the original are back and better than ever. Like the puzzles, both old and new, which have been very well designed and implemented here. The iconic merchant, of course, how can we not mention him, who looks and sounds as mysterious as ever, and now gives you these new side quests to do, that give those meager spinels from the original game an actual important purpose now. And then also the hidden collectibles that have a fun new mechanic with how you can combine them with a series of gems to sell them for the highest possible value, which is entirely manipulable. These are all extremely fun and incentivizing to engage with in this game. But my personal favorite of all, you guys, was of course the firing range, which is snazzier and funkier than ever, with a genius overhaul to its aesthetic and gameplay that kept me immersed for hours. Now over there you can shoot a bunch of different targets in different galleries for a variety of charms, which is a new concept. You can attach these charms to your suitcase now that Leon carries around with him. That gives him a variety of bonuses, like for example, you can get more HP, you can get, you know, more ammo when you craft more ammo, and crafting is another new thing in the game. There's just so much that's been added here, so much novelty, and it's all great. And everything looks beautiful too. Like seeing Leon's inventory for the first time and the UI of it, I was in love. I love the look of everything here, the aesthetics, all of it. But on top of all these changes and improvements, something else I really admire about this remake is the way in which it trimmed a lot of unneeded areas and sequences from the original to improve the pacing. Now, without going into spoilers, there are some noticeable omissions this game makes, such as cutting out an entire boss fight and some indelible set pieces from the original. But looking back, while those sequences were really fun, they did add a lot of bloat to the original game's pacing, so I couldn't really be too disappointed when it came to cutting this content. The cutting overall was done very tastefully and didn't leave me yearning for things from the original that we didn't get to experience here. And of course the cutscenes. The cutscenes and cinematics, which weren't too bad in the original, have pretty much been put to shame retroactively in my opinion, given how amazingly well they've been rewritten and directed here in the remake, which, as I hinted at before, features vastly superior writing, storytelling, and character dynamics, which are a joy to witness. Right from the deeply disturbing opening cutscene of this game, Leon's story of having to save Ashley, the president's daughter, from a parasitic and demented cult in rural Spain is woven masterfully in this game, and injects a solid dose of horror into an experience that is just as action-packed as the original. And it also beckons so much more interest from the player than in the original game. There was not a single second where I got bored of this game or where things became dull for me. The game never lost steam, and I was so much more emotionally invested throughout the experience than I was in the original. And the elephant in the room throughout all of this, which I didn't even bother to mention at all at the start because, let's be real, right? It should go without saying, are the graphics. Resident Evil 4 Remake is a visual marvel and does so much justice to the iconic and memorable locations, set pieces, and characters from the original game by breathing the photorealistic beauty of the RE engine into them, which is quickly turning into what is perhaps my favorite game engine ever. The gameplay and controls dictated by it are so fluid, and it is so nice to be able to witness everything we all know and love from the original game being showcased beautifully on both a visual and directorial level at the same time. The team behind Resident Evil 2 Remake and now this one right here have been on a roll and clearly know how to make a quality video game with the RE engine. And remake or no, I eagerly anticipate their next game in this franchise. So, to take it back to the beginning, like I said at the start of this review, this is how you do a fucking remake. You take what fans loved, make it better in every way, while still embracing your original identity as opposed to shying away from it. Resident Evil 4 Remake does all of this without missing the mark even once, and makes for, dare I say, the greatest remake to a game that I have personally ever experienced. And to those of you who know me pretty well, this should come as a shocker, because what I'm saying here is coming from someone whose favorite game of all time is Final Fantasy VII, and someone who adored the remake to that game. But even then I can admit that the FF7 remake had some areas where I stopped and had to say to myself, you know what? I think the original 1997 game handled this little segment a tiny bit better. But Resident Evil 4 Remake, man, oh boy. There's not a single problem spot from my perspective when you juxtapose it to its original counterpart. And for being able to accomplish that tremendous feat alone, Resident Evil 4 gets the highest 10 out of 10 from me. It is a masterpiece and the closest a remake can get to being perfect. Because there's no such thing as perfect, you can't get there. But if I tried my ass off, right? If I really tried to look for flaws in this game behind its absurd level of polish, care, and love, I could only really come up with maybe one thing personally that isn't even really a flaw per se, but more of a meh sort of moment. And without going into spoilers, that's one of the boss fights close to the beginning of the game, which isn't bad at all by any means, it's not. But it feels a little uninspired, and too close to the original for my liking. But that is such a small thing to nitpick at, and really about all I can think of when it comes to trying to find any weaknesses here. That is just how much I adore this experience, and I would highly recommend it to anyone else. Just looking for a quality horror title to play if you're into the horror genre or not, right? This is a great place to get into it. Or if you're just a newcomer who might be looking for a great place to enter the Resident Evil franchise. This is the game for you. This is it right here. What an incredible game. What an incredible year it's been so far for games. Oh, we're only like 3 months into this year, and I already have 2 solid Game of the Year contenders with this and Hi-Fi Rush. But yeah, that concludes the review today, folks. Thank you all so much for watching, and also for just tuning in while I stream this game over on Twitch. You know, normally when a new game is out, nobody tunes into my streams, which is completely understandable, since they'd want to avoid spoilers and experience the game for themselves, right? But this time it was different, and I was truly blown away. I think the overwhelming love that people had for this game, I saw so many amazing folks stop by to drop some good wishes for my playthrough. Despite, of course, wanting to avoid spoilers and play the game themselves. So thank you so much for your company and your support, you guys. It always means a lot to me. Now, even though the story may be over, the journey isn't, and I'm going to be continuing Resident Evil 4 Remake very likely over on twitch.tv/irritableindian. I have never jumped back into an RE game for a subsequent playthrough, but I loved this game so much, and I think this is the first time I'm going to do it. So for the first time, I'm going to immediately jump back into this game and play through it again on professional difficulty, which is the hardest difficulty in RE4 Remake. I'm down for a good old challenge. So if you want to witness the horror, then do be sure to follow me over there. Again, that's twitch.tv/irritableindian. Link is in the description. And hey, if you enjoyed today's review, do be sure to like and subscribe, since these kind of vids aren't going anywhere. And I'm so eager to make many, many, many more down the line. But folks, until the next one, stay happy, stay healthy, stay Plagas free, and as always, keep on keeping on.